Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Bengal Tiger podcast. I'm Billy Embody. With me is Shea Dixon. We've got a lot to get to today, so let's jump right on in. We lead off with what could be the news of the weekend, and that was LSU hosting five-star quarterback and the nation's number one overall prospect, Bryce Underwood, for yet another visit. Quarterbacks coach Joe Sloan, Brian Kelly, they laid out the red carpet this weekend for Underwood and his family. Shea, it's early, but this is one of those visits where it was the only one he had scheduled for June. This might be a big step in the right direction for LSU long term.
Oh, might be. It definitely is. Just think about how often a school is able to get the number one overall player on campus, and then also that player be then a quarterback, the number one quarterback in the country. So the biggest position that a college team is after, if not one of the biggest every cycle, is the quarterback spot. And Underwood is being talked about as one of the best quarterbacks to come out in the past few years. I know people are probably listening on the podcast, but if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, here's a bunch of video we took of Underwood throwing in Tiger Stadium. Billy, they took the campers, the elite campers, into Tiger Stadium for the first time, at least in the 20 years or almost 20 years. I'm dating myself. That I've been around the LSU program and covering summer camps, and they shook it up for a reason, whether it was Underwood being there. You see in these videos, James Simon, Harlem Berry, Juwan Johnson, Deshaun McBride, so many, whether it be commits or top targets. And I think the kids really liked that and soaked it in. The Friday Night Lights experiences, they tabbed it. But I just sum it up with this. If very rarely, like if they landed Bryce Underwood, Billy, it would be the equivalent of a Ryan Perrilloux, or when they went into Texas and got Russell Shepard, and I know Jamarcus didn't leave high school with the number one rating that he did when he got picked, but going into Alabama and getting a Jamarcus Russell, Bryce Underwood's going to be a game changer for whichever college he goes to. The fact that a Michigan native is seemingly highest on Michigan and LSU at this point, with, let's say, 6 months or so still to go in his recruitment before dominoes might start falling, that's a really, really big deal to me.
I completely agree. And for those watching on YouTube too, and for those who caught the highlights that we posted on our YouTube channel, it was kind of a tough group for Underwood to have to adjust to as far as wide receivers go. They ended up even putting Harlem Berry and James Simon at wide out at times to try and help out that offense that was going against guys like Deshaun McBride, Juwan Johnson, Charles Ross from Texas in the 2025 class, guys like that. But I think with his mom's birthday being that weekend too, they wanted to spend it down in Baton Rouge. That was something Bryce's dad told me as well. They just thought it'd be a special visit to take. And you date it back all the way to when they first hit Baton Rouge with the new staff this spring. And his dad told me this is one of those visits that he really wanted to take. And for them to take the time to, out of their schedule in the summer, to come down to Baton Rouge in June, and throw. I mean, I don't think anybody really expects the number one player in the country to come to camp and throw, quite honestly, but he wanted to do that too and work with Joe Sloan. I think that is just about as good as it gets for what LSU wanted to accomplish at the weekend. And I talked with his dad, and he was saying, look, we have some issues up at Bellevue that we're trying to get right for the season. I don't know if issues mean anything, insane, but just Bryce is the number one player in the country. He's the straw that stirs that drink up there at Bellevue, and they want to have the best season he can have as a junior and then obviously on to his senior year. And so they're really honed in on that. And that's why they haven't taken any visits, but they made the time to go down to LSU. So like you said, probably about 6 months or so in this one to go before either he whittles it down or makes a decision even. And there's going to be some fall visits, and who knows, LSU could be one of those schools that gets one of those visits. And they've teed themselves up well here to be, quite frankly, I think you could argue they're the leader ending the summer, even though there's another month left in summer.
Yeah, and I think Michigan's gotten him to campus a ton of times, so he knows what they have to offer. This was big because it was his second visit to LSU in the span of 3 months, both being unofficial visits. Both time his dad, who's been very close to him in this process, has been with him. And as you noted, this weekend, not only on Father's Day, but you get his mom down for her birthday. We saw a video that he had shared of Brian Kelly, with the cake and singing it, everyone's singing his mom happy birthday while dinner at Tiger Stadium. So I thought that was sort of for an unofficial visit weekend, Billy. It can't get any bigger. That's about as much as you can do for a prospect. So progress made for me. One of the best, top 3 storylines of the summer for LSU, getting the number 1 overall player on campus for multiple days.
Yeah, no question. It was like a semi-official visit in a sense for Bryce Underwood to get that amount of time with the staff. So good job, Joe Sloan and the staff for continuing to just chip away at that recruitment. I mean, we've seen some high-profile quarterbacks hit campus before, but I mean, if you're looking at it, I mean, save for Dante Moore early on last cycle when he visited LSU. I think he visited twice in a couple months. I could be wrong on that. But this one, at least in terms of buzz, is palpable. It's not like Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence of the past, coming through campus and just, you're not expecting much. This seems very real. And I would say it is real as far as LSU's chances go to land the number 1 player in the country. So we move on, if that's all you had on that, Shea, to the big official visit weekend that LSU had. And look, this one had some Georgia flavor to it. Let's start there because we'll kind of talk about one of the other prospects in a bit as far as RPM picks go. But LSU did host a trio of Georgia prospects for their official visits. And one of them was JoJo Stone, who shut things down in his recruitment late last week and was back in Baton Rouge for the first time in a minute doing some recruiting. They hosted top 100 edge CJ Jackson, as well as 4-star defensive back Jalen Crawford, both from Georgia, and all 3 know each other very well. CJ Jackson and Jalen Crawford played together at one point. JoJo Stone is well aware of those guys, and Jalen Crawford actually said that him and JoJo grew up playing youth league together. So that's another big visit for those 3 to get on campus. They've all been to LSU before. CJ Jackson only once, but Jalen Crawford multiple times. And I feel like, especially with CJ Jackson, LSU's starting to trend that way with him, I would think.
Yeah, massive weekend. I like they're about to have a huge visit weekend coming up as well. I like what they did this past weekend of getting a lot of those Georgia kids in at the same time. And Billy, we were in the indoor facility watching camp, and the official visitors rolled through, and they were hanging out with guys like DJ Chester, sorry for the pause, out of Georgia, who LSU signed a year ago, and knows a lot of these guys who are now rising seniors. And the ability to get a CJ Jackson to campus, who, as you see, if you're watching, an On3 top 100 player, the number 7 edge rusher in the country. I said this in a piece on Monday on the site, but edge rusher is so important. Maybe one of the most important pieces to LSU's defense, and to any defense, if that's what you're running, is someone who can get after the quarterback and get into the backfield. We saw BJ Ojulari be that guy this year. They just signed a Deshaun Womack, a 5-star at the position this past cycle. And Colin Simmons has stolen all the headlines, really, as the edge rusher that they're after in the 2024 cycle, the current one. But CJ Jackson's a really good player. And when we saw him in the indoor facility, Billy, he's filled out. He is a big kid, looks like someone who would play the edge rusher role. And having him around on a weekend where JoJo Stone, a Georgia wide receiver, 4-star, doubles down on his commitment to LSU, and he gets to spend time with Jalen Crawford. And look, guys like Bobby Barham, LSU staff members on the personnel side, have put in a ton of work on these Georgia guys. So I thought it was an important weekend to get Jackson into town. I thought the biggest maybe storyline to immediately come out of it, and we haven't talked about yet, Connor Gilbreth committing. He's a JUCO guy, though, that'll play immediately. But of the high school guys, was your On3 RPM pick for Ori Williams, because Marcus Mescal, someone that we had thought for a while was trending to LSU, ends up committing to Florida. And when you talk about 3 stars that LSU's offered and felt good about, hey, these are guys we can develop, Ori Williams' name was right there with Mescal's. Now that Mescal's off the board, Billy, I kind of feel like, hey, look, you got Williams on the campus, you're battling. I don't think Texas is as big of a threat as an A&M would be, but you're battling those schools for a guy who when we saw him in person, he looked like someone who was probably already on LSU's roster. I mean, he is a long, tall, I'd say skinny. He's 285 pounds, but a skinny 285 to where he looked really good to me. I was impressed upon seeing him for the first time, without pads.
Yeah, and Ori is one of those kids that would fit really well into the culture of LSU as well. And LSU is the leader here. I don't think it's any secret. He's made no bones about it, about how he feels about Brad Davis and Brian Kelly and what they could do for him long term. And he is a guy that will take some time, I think, to refine that technique. But you can't teach 6'7", 285, 290 and look the way he does, just physically. And even when he was standing there with DJ Chester and I think a couple other guys that are currently on the team as well, he's around Kamorian Pimpton, who's a huge guy. This is one of those players that looks the part, like you said, and LSU is going to have to weather a few months. He plans to make a decision in his senior season and announce it before one of his games. But LSU is a clear leader here. He's also from Louisiana, originally Monroe area too. So he's got those ties, and he just says, look, it feels like home. So to get Ori Williams on campus was huge. It was expected. It wasn't a surprise, but just continue to keep chipping away on that recruitment as Brad Davis sits in a good spot. They've also got Kyrie Lee already committed. So Marcus Moscoli went to Florida, really was viewed as somebody that could be a little bit of a versatile piece, tackle, maybe guard. And Kyrie Lee, the way he's shed some weight, we saw him this weekend as well, looks the part of a guy that could maybe play a little bit of right tackle, but primarily guard too. So LSU doing well there with Ori Williams. One other prospect that I feel like they made some waves with, and a guy we've seen linked for a long time, and he was one of two defensive backs on campus alongside LSU commit Andre Evans, who committed last week and made his way to campus, Jalen Crawford. And there's some intrigue around Jalen Crawford just because he's been linked to LSU for so long. And this is one of those prospects that they have not let up on. You posted some notes on the board last week, and LSU's still pushing despite getting Andre Evans and getting Kai Bates to campus this coming weekend, and then Kobe Black in the future, Wardell Mack on the board. They want Jalen Crawford. And Brian Kelly's message was, look, go through your process. We're not going to rush you. We're not dying to pressure you into a decision. And I think that played well with him.
Yeah, I don't. It's still too early for me to call with Jalen Crawford, and I know he's got Auburn out there. Florida made an impression early in the month, but I also look at it like this, and people are wondering, well, how many corners can LSU take? And Wardell Mack still out there, and Kobe Black, the number 2 corner in the country, is going to visit in the spring, in the fall for a game in September, and notably, as you said, Kai Bates out of Florida is coming in this weekend, who's a top priority for them. Yes, you've got commitments from 3 corners right now, Andre Evans being the most recent, but Juwan Johnson's on board, or I should say 4, really, if you kind of are all slotting him there. Juwan Johnson, who looked awesome at camp, flipped from Colorado to LSU as a Louisiana guy. Zion Ferguson still on board out of Georgia as a 4-star corner. And then Wallace Foster out of New Orleans, who was healthy again for the first time, and we saw him at camp. He looked really good. Now, some of these guys can play in the nickel, but the point remains, you would take a Jalen Crawford. You'll take a Kai Bates. You'll certainly take Wardell Mack. You would take Kobe Black, because LaTerrence Welsh is the only player on roster, high school-wise, that they signed that is coming back from a year ago. We're now running on a multi-year rebuild where Brian Kelly, Billy, took 8 corners in his first 2 off seasons and 4 in each class. I mean, it wasn't like they took them all at once. 4 corners a year ago, and then they turn around and do it again in the transfer portal with 4 more. Yes, that's an immediate fix, and we saw it help this past season. And now guys like Denver Harris and Deuce Chestnut and Zy Alexander and J.K. Johnson, all of these guys will help out this year in a big way by potentially being starters and certainly playing a lot. But you've got to go back to high school at some point. And I like what they're doing at corner right now. Yes, they've got a handful already on board, and they're going to add a handful more because they need to get back to developing those younger guys, not having to worry about the portal each year. And that's exactly what they're doing, in my opinion, in this 24 class at corner.
Yeah, this is the perfect situation to be in a sense, because you have a guy like Andre Evans already committed. You have Jawan, you have Wallace already on board. you still have Zion Ferguson committed, at least as of, as it stands right now. I mean, we were kind of circling JoJo Stone as a guy who might end up elsewhere, but he shut things down and obviously stayed firm with LSU. Zion Ferguson is on board. Now you can just push for whoever, and they're all quality guys. I don't think you can go necessarily wrong. Obviously, the headliners are going to be, a guy who we have had in 5-star range and is from Louisiana, Wardell Mack, as well as Kobe Black, who's a 5-star. You have those guys, as well as Kai Bates, who I think can move up too, still on the board. But Jalen Crawford just, he's an interesting prospect. He doesn't tip his hand. He told me he doesn't have leaders. Florida feels like they've made a push. Auburn has made a push with him, but now he's going to sit down and make that decision come July. And by that point, who knows? Not that I don't necessarily think LSU would be full and turn him away at all, but if they were able to get a Kai Bates on board, if they were able to maybe get Wardell Mack to commit at some point, even though it looks like he's trending to the fall, maybe something changes and the numbers work themselves out. But they did a really nice job on this visit, and Robert Steeples has built a nice relationship there.
It'll be interesting to see play out. I think that as long as you can come away with a Bates or a Crawford, that you're in a really good spot, obviously, and then Wardell Mack will come closer to signing day and kind of see what else happens from there. But I do like a lot what they've done at corner right now. It's exactly what they needed.
No doubt. And look, there's a little bit of time there Sunday morning when some LSU fans on our board could probably use some Rogue Shop, Shea. Promo code Bengal Tiger gets you 10% off your order. Richard and Shar, they run their craft cannabis company as a husband and wife outfit. It's veteran owned. And look, they've been terrific partners for us. And, Shea, you had some back problems earlier this summer. You know what would have worked perfectly? The pain cream. That really just relaxes those muscles. I use it after I play hockey. They've got whatever lineup you need of products to help with sleep, anxiety, pain, all those things. And they'll walk you through it on the site with the live chat feature as well.
Yep. All the legal CBD, THC, and more. Promo code Bengal Tiger. Billy, you're right. This is also going to be a nice segue into our next segment. A lot of LSU recruiting fans, especially those on our board on the Bengal Tiger right now, should take advantage of Rogue Shop for the anxiety. It will really help them sleep at night. And maybe more importantly, Billy, just get through the day without a melt over recruiting. So shout out to Rogue Shop. They've been great to us, and we'll continue supporting them as they sponsor us.
And you weren't here last summer with us, at least, Shea, but we were around this time when people were wondering what's going on. When are the commits going to come? And LSU went on a roll in July and August, both in Louisiana and outside the state. And I think even though this cycle may be a little different in Louisiana with some of the guys they already have gotten on board early, and that's a credit to the staff, and also just shows that, with a year of time, a whole extra, year to build those relationships, those guys were ready to make the call maybe earlier than the guys last cycle. But I still think LSU's poised for a run at the end of June, maybe into July, and people can kind of calm a little bit on the LSU recruiting front. And you had a 2,500 plus words on the site about the current state of LSU recruiting. And so if you haven't checked out the BengalTiger.com, subscribe, get a 7-day trial. It's just $10 a month right now. You also can gift a Bengal Tiger subscription. So if you got a friend or family member that you feel like should be on there, you can now buy a gift subscription. So check that out as well. But this is not the time to sit back and, lack of a better term, kind of cry about where recruiting stands. Not only is there months and months to go before December and February when the signing periods begin. And look, we'll have a really good idea where LSU is truly trending by the end of this summer. And a lot of these kids are making those announcements. We're seeing a run of them right now. June's half over. We've seen guys take official visits and make the call. We've seen LSU pick up some commitments. When the summer dust settles, you know what you'll have left to accomplish if you're LSU. And that isn't necessarily a time to melt because there is still more time. But we don't necessarily have a clear picture of LSU's getting XYZ player and they're not getting ABC player throw your hands up and say this is, a bad situation to be in or a good situation to be in.
Yeah, if you missed my piece, 10 Thoughts, the Mood Tracker, it was the 2,500 word essay that I pinned on Monday morning. And I don't want to say it was all because the fans were kind of panicking on the site, but it played a heavy role. And so I kind of laid it all out, got my thoughts out there, put pen to paper, and kind of crunched it down to 10 things. I'll highlight a couple of them because I think they're important when talking about where I feel like they're at right now. One, you're a week off from LSU popping 3 commits in 4 days, and that includes a top 5 player in the state in Joel Rogers at a position of need at safety. That includes someone who long-term might be the best receiver in the state of Louisiana this cycle in Kylan Billiot, and then most recently a top 100 player at a big position of need, cornerback, in Andre Evans. That right there is great. There should be no time within the next few days you're panicking after that. I think what LSU fans see and saw this weekend was Florida got hot and went on a run of adding some players, including Marcus Mescal, a guy who was thought to be trending towards LSU for the past few months. Well, that also came on the heels of Florida having their quarterback commitment flip to Ole Miss, reclassify multiple classes out, and be ready to enroll, basically. It was gut punch, Sunbelt Billy to now, Florida's one of the hottest teams in the country. The ebbs and flows in recruiting, Billy, are always going to be there. You got to ride them out. And what the goal for LSU is, and any staff, is when signing day comes, did you, A, add talent to the roster? Did your roster get better with your recruiting class? And did you fill needs? And for me, midway through the cycle, you can get a little bit of sense for the filling needs. And I do think that they've done that well. We've mentioned cornerback, defensive back really as a whole by landing Joel Rogers and Deshaun McBride, the 2 top safeties in Louisiana. One of the best safeties in the country, Ori Williams, is also committed. We've also seen them in recent years, or, let's say this past cycle and the one before it, Brian Kelly's time here, beef up the O-line in a big way. A lot of the best kids who play O-line for LSU right now are younger guys and incoming guys. Tight end room went from nothing to something in a big way and in a hurry in the span of about 6 months. I know people are focused on D-line, and look, rightfully so. They've also repaired the linebacker room. I could keep going here. You've been through 3 D-line coaches in 3 years. Relationships and recruiting are paramount. It is very hard to have relationships with the best kids in the country and keep going through a defensive line coach every year. Now, that's why I like that Jimmy Lindsey comes from South Carolina. He knows what it takes to recruit in the SEC. He's recruited some of these guys before. They've got a couple of Louisiana guys already committed, but let's just be real. This conversation will begin and end with the number 1 player in Louisiana, Dominic McKinley out of Acadiana. He's not shutting things down anytime soon, so that gives Jimmy Lindsey a chance to build a relationship there and LSU to continue to push forward there. But I loved what they did in camp season, and I always think that should be something that's valued because it's the only time in a whole recruiting cycle, Billy, where coaches are legally allowed by the NCAA to be hands-on with a kid, running them through drills, testing, combine, on-field workouts, one-on-ones, whatever it might be that they want to see, you can do. And that gives you so much more than film can give you or, reading about what a kid's done at on the track and field circuit or whatever it might be that you see in the evaluation period when you go to a high school. And they handed out new offers. We got a clearer picture on the receiver board when they went for in-state guys like Michael Turner and Kylan Billiot with offers. We got a good feel now for what the cornerback room will look like by offering Andre Evans, getting him to camp, and then getting him to shut things down. And they really, and I don't want to go too far into this with the future, but when Keelan Moses at U-High and Lamar Brown at U-High and Harlan Berry, the number 1 running back in the country for next year out of the New Orleans area, and James Simon, a top 10 running back coming out of North Louisiana, and I could go on and on. These kids are underclassmen. When they're spending time around campus like they were and really getting to know the staff, the players, the other, top targets, all of that pays off in a big way because when it comes to decision time, they've been around LSU's program their whole high school career. And when you went through that coaching transition from O to Kelly, you were going to take some road bumps. A year ago, 6 of the top 10 players in Louisiana signed out of state, and you can't have that happen. So the fence has to go up. Well, Billy, right now, 6 of the top 10 in Louisiana are committed to LSU. Nobody in the top 15 of the state Louisiana rankings is committed to an out-of-state school. So by everything that I can tell, they're doing a nice job putting that fence up and closing with guys and getting guys on board. Are they ranked 11 and do they have 18 commits where you'd like to see more top end guys? Yeah, but it's not signing day. So there's a long time for that to happen. A year ago, as you mentioned, people were panicking. They had like 5 or 6 commits at this time, and everyone said Brian Kelly couldn't recruit. They finished with a top 5 class. So give it time there. And remember, give it time for rankings to end. They don't finalize till February. You could be looking at a lot of guys, and not a lot, but you could be looking at guys in LSU's class, Billy, and say, well, he's a 3-star ranked outside the top 50 at his position. You look up at the end of the cycle and he's a top 100 player. So let's give it time. I very much like the direction things are going. I love the emphasis being put on Louisiana. And by all, mood tracking that I can do, LSU fans can panic when they want, Billy. I told them a year ago when they had 5 commitments in the summer, don't panic. They got a top 5 class. There is no need to panic. I think this will be better than a top 10 class. I still feel this will be another top 5 to 6 class for Brian Kelly and company in a season or a cycle where we knew Louisiana would be down on really top end talent compared to where it was a year ago or where it will be a year from now. So I'm not in any way worried right now. In fact, I feel good about them having 18 commitments, and I like a lot of the moves that they're making.
Yeah, and I think that's the right approach too. I mean, the way they're going about things in Louisiana is the right way to do it. Guys don't camp. They're not going to end up getting offered and pressed for. We saw a couple guys we thought maybe might pop down to camp. They didn't. So you can pretty much strike them from the board in a sense, even down the line. They want guys who are going to compete. Michael Turner, there were some people on the staff that were ready to offer him after his first camp earlier this month, but they said, you know what? Come back one more time. Let's work you out. Let's get you with Cortez Hankton, him, Mike Denbrock, Carter Smith, who was a 2025 4-star quarterback that was there. They worked him through the whole routine. And sure enough, Brian Kelly extended the offer to him. Meant a lot. He's at Nebraska right now, but that's a guy that we both have predictions in for to land at LSU. And he's a guy that has elite speed and twitch. And those are things you truly can't teach. And so I like some of the evaluations they're making late. I say late, but late in the process in a sense for Louisiana. Maybe there's a guy like a Dylan Carpenter that emerges as a senior, but this is that time of year where we really see a lot of those evaluations and the board stacking get finalized. Now it's at that place and they know who they can push for both in and out of state. They have a good idea of where they stand with a lot of prospects, and the chips are going to fall however they do. And some of them, people are going to melt over. Some of them, people are going to say, they weren't getting them anyway. Sterling Dixon shut down his recruitment after his official visit to Alabama, but lost in that was that Colin Simmons, basically, he's not going to Alabama from what we hear, and was on campus for an official visit this past weekend in Tuscaloosa. So the ebbs and flows are always interesting, but last year showed they got a good idea of what they're doing, and I'm with you. I think this can be a top 5 class if they clean up in Louisiana and they get some of the guys that they're on out of state.
A lot of time for it to happen. I guess we should wrap up with some good news. Well, I guess, yeah, good news, and also plays into who they could be going with. There's been some shuffling on the On3 RPM here recently. Billy, you made the pick on Ori Williams, but I should also note Draylon Miller, wide receiver out of Texas, is about to announce his commitment at the end of the month. I don't know how many days we're out now. I think it's the 29th, was it?
Yep.
But was it 29th?
Yes.
29th. Okay. And Lonnie Watkins, one of their top receiver targets, is coming on an official visit this weekend. Billy, now for all 3 Texas guys, LSU is in the lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. Your thoughts there? I'm putting this one on you as the Texas native in our or Texas resident on the podcast. Go for it.
Yeah, this is one of those. You're going to get, I think, 2 pieces of good news on this one. One, Ori Williams. I mean, he's, like I said earlier in the pod, he's named LSU's leader. He's got Louisiana ties. He loves Brad Davis. I think barring Georgia really turning the heat up to make things interesting, I would be surprised if he went anywhere else than LSU. His cousin Ruben Owens is at A&M, but I'm a believer of this, that signing other players doesn't land you those prospects down the line. I just don't think that in the end is what makes decisions for prospects when they're ready to make that decision. And Ori Williams has maintained throughout his visits that LSU is the leader. So feel really good about that pick there. And, barring a shift, I'll be there in San Marcos whenever he makes the announcement. Then you get to Lonnie Watkins, who is one of the best track athletes in America. He won the state 100 and 200 meter, I believe, in Texas at the highest level. And he is kind of a gadget type player. I guess the good comp for him would probably be Aaron Anderson, in the sense of how LSU's recruiting him, how they would use him. He's also got some ties to Louisiana. I believe either his brother or cousin is Monty Watkins, who came out of the state a couple years back. He is a guy LSU has pushed for throughout. You talk to anybody who's interviewed him, which is hard to do. He doesn't really do interviews or talk to anyone unless it's in person. And they all come away saying LSU's in the lead there. And now he's going to officially visit next weekend. And look, we'll preview next week, or this coming weekend's official visit weekend on another podcast, because double-digit guys as of now are hitting Baton Rouge. But Lonnie Watkins is one of them. And I think this is one of those players that is so quiet, you don't necessarily know what he's thinking in terms of, well, when is he going to make a decision? Who is there a dark horse in there or whatever? But I would guess he would want his decision done before his senior season, like a lot of these guys. And LSU's done a really good job recruiting him there. And if I knew him and talked to him a ton, I would probably have a pick in, but he just doesn't really do interviews. So he's a guy that if LSU gets on board, I'm looking forward to getting to see him in person, because he is so explosive with the ball in his hands. Lastly, this one is interesting, Shea, and we've talked about him a lot, but Draylon Miller, who is out of the state of Texas in Silsbee, is a top 100 prospect nationally, was at LSU 7-on-7 camp, and is fresh off a USC official visit this past weekend. There was some buzz earlier this spring and summer that the Trojans were a real threat to that one, but talking with sources, I just don't see it panning out that way. I think he's going to stay close to home. He's got a family that his dad, I believe, is a coach at Silsbee, but both of his uncles are also coaches at Silsbee. So this is a family that is a football family, and his dad played basketball at Texas Southern while Cortez Hankton was there. But Texas A&M is also lurking here, and they're kind of in the same boat LSU was as far as their visit goes. Both are going to be unofficial visits this summer, both around 7-on-7 camps that Silsbee is going to right in the backyard of, or I say backyard, but basically in town for both LSU and Texas A&M. We hear confidence from LSU's side. There's also confidence on A&M's side, and those are the two schools that I'm circling that are going to battle this out, maybe even beyond June 29th, his commitment date, because he is somebody that has 2 official visits to both schools in his back pocket, but he's done a good job not tipping his hand. This is one that I don't know. I don't think LSU is counting him as in right now. We talked to sources. Doesn't seem like a silent commitment situation, but he's very much a big picture overall target for how this wide receiver class could pan out for LSU.
Yeah, and we got clarity really on Louisiana with Kobe Young being the only guy who entered the month of June with an offer in Louisiana. He never camps at LSU all summer, and they end up offering Kylan Billio, offering Michael Turner. Now Billiotta's committed. Michael Turner's trending to LSU. So a guy like Kobe Young, I had to move my LSU pick off of him on the On3 RPM. I don't know if they don't come together maybe down the line, but right now it's evident that Cortez Hankton has his focus elsewhere. And he's already hosted some official visitors at receiver this month. But I do think these upcoming decisions with Draylon Miller and then the visit with Lonnie Watkins will go a long way. I just get a feel like LSU comes away with one of them. It just seems like those were the 2 Texas guys that they always had a legitimate shot at. And when the dust settles, if you add 2 or 3 guys in Louisiana and you get one out of Texas and you've got JoJo Stone out of Georgia, and we've confirmed, Billy, with sources, they are willing to take a 5-man receiver class if it's the right guys. I just get the sense, at least for me, my gut tells me by signing day, either Miller or Watkins would be in the class. Actually, let me redo that. By the end of the summer, one of those two will be in the class. I don't know how it all pans out, but it seems like they're trending for at least to get one on board.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's going to be Watkins right now. If this was June 29th and we were recording this and previewing Draylon's decision, I would probably pick the Aggies right now. Jimbo Fisher is personally recruiting him, which I think is a factor there. Cortez Hankton has really led the way on LSU's end, which makes sense with his ties with his dad. But Jimbo Fisher, whenever he's taking a big role in your recruitment, the Aggies can be tough to beat often for those type of prospects.
That's it for me. You got anything else, Billy?
I mean, what a camp season. I think
it was really good.
Yeah, I think the LSU staff did a really nice job putting together camp. It was great for us access-wise, which is always not how you judge camps, but how you judge camps in a sense, because these are really good opportunities. I mean, Cody Belair this summer and Charles Power last summer, they're both on our On3 rankings team, and LSU is, I believe, the only college camp that they attended, which not to say that they're, taking it easy or whatever, but there's 7-on-7. There's all sorts of other things they've got to get to. Elite 11 was this past weekend with Colin Hurley being in LA for that, and OT7. But they make the time to come down to Louisiana and spend that time, because that's how much talent LSU gets to campus for pretty much all the camps.
And Frank Wilson said on that final day of camp that with what we believe, they had well over 800 pre-registered and more than 100 walk-ups who attended camp. So that number was at about 1,000 camp visitors. He announced at camp that it was the largest camp in program history. So for a staff that values summer camps, they ended with a bang.
Yeah, no question about it. Just awesome month. It was fun for us. And I mean, I say awesome month. There's still well over a week left in it. And we'll see how LSU does once these guys start making decisions. Be sure to be on the Bengal Tiger next weekend. I mean, that's a massive recruiting weekend for them. And who knows? I would think they come away with a few commitments out of that group. We'll kind of see. They're shooting for the stars on some of them, but they just seem to, have a little bit of momentum, even if fans don't necessarily see it as much as we do. So big end of the month for LSU, and then things go dead, and there's a last weekend in July where they'll host visitors again. So be sure to jump on board. Again, that 7-day free trial, just $10 a month. You can subscribe to the Bengal Tiger. You get your free Founders Club hat as well. So check that out. If you have any issues getting the Founders Club hat, DM me, email me, or respond on the thread on the YouTube channel where the video is, and we'll get you situated and all that. So appreciate everybody for listening and getting us to over 4,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel as well. What a mark for us there. So for Shea Dixon, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening to this edition of the podcast, and we'll catch you next time on the Bengal Tiger Podcast.